Hello, today I'm reviewing a Goofy movie. This came out all the way back in 1999. I'm reviewing it here today in 2018. So I guess the obvious question is why? What am I doing reviewing this movie now in 2018 at the age of 39? The short answer is I've started this project of reviewing every movie I see. I actually started doing this years ago, 10 years ago, 13 years ago, but I've been doing it on my blog most of that time. These video reviews I've just kind of started doing in the last year as kind of an experiment or to supplement the blog. Where after I kind of write the review on the blog, I just turn on the camera and kind of ramble for 30 minutes and just, I don't know, just see if anything intelligent emerges while I'm rambling. So the video reviews I've only been doing for about a year now, but kind of going back more than 10 years now, I've made a habit of reviewing every movie I see. Every new movie I see. New meaning new to me. So for example, if I see like Star Wars for the 50th time, I don't do a review of that because I've already seen it several times. But anytime I see a new movie, I try and review it and give my thoughts on it. Why? I don't know. Just because I have all these thoughts bouncing around my head and it's a good outlet for it. I think maybe it's a good intellectual exercise to try and engage with the media you watch. And I don't know, maybe I just have too much free time. But it's a habit I've gotten into, and I try to be very thorough about it, which means kind of any movie I see that I see for the first time, whether it's a good movie or a bad movie or a big release or one of these silly, stupid little movies or something like that, I always try to kind of give my thoughts on it. So that's kind of my long preamble as to why I'm wasting your time with this video review. Who knows, maybe I'll ramble around and say something intelligent. Maybe I won't, we'll just have to see. So let me give like a little bit of brief background on this movie. This movie came out in 1995, and it was based on kind of the TV show called The Goof Troop. Or just Goof Troop, I think. No, the. I actually watched that TV show. That the Goof Troop came out right when I was finishing up 8th grade. If you count the preview on the Disney Channel, which I'm doing. Came out right kind of the spring I was in 8th grade. And that was kind of, I guess I was, how old would I have been then? 14? So, you know, right around that age where you're kind of outgrowing cartoons. I was certainly at that age embarrassed to admit I was still watching cartoons, but I did. And I think, I don't know, maybe I'm making a confession here I shouldn't make, but I think maybe that's true for a lot of us around this age, kind of 13, 14, 15. You're kind of too cool to tell your friends you're watching cartoons, but you still watch cartoons. You know, you come home from school and you still put on the cartoons. Saturday mornings, you still take in cartoons. Saturday morning cartoons aren't even a thing anymore, are they? Anyways, I still watched it. I watched it because I still watched cartoons at that age. And also, throughout my childhood, I was a huge Disney fan. I kind of grew up on the Disney Channel. I knew all the Disney lore. So when this Goof Troop came out, I knew exactly who these characters were. Kind of everyone knows Goofy, of course, but Peg Leg Pete, I kind of knew the whole history of the character. I was a big Disney fan. So I watched and enjoyed the Goof Troop TV show. I was a little bit too old for it, but I enjoyed it. It was funny. It was a good kind of suburban comedy. I remember the endings used to have always kind of some wacky slapstick. Like there would be a fire engine kind of getting out of control and kind of careening around the neighborhood, and Goofy and his son would be kind of jumping all over trying to stop the thing. I've got good memories about it. I remember it was good for what it was. Now, The movie came out in 1995. I was looking this up on Wikipedia because I didn't remember the exact date, but it came out in 1995 in April, at which point I was just 1 month shy of turning 18. I was just a couple months shy of graduating from high school. And at that point, I really was kind of over cartoons. Like, I wasn't even kind of pretending anymore. I had lost interest in it completely, really, at that point. It's funny when you're a kid how much changes in such a short time. I mean, you're an adult and 10 years go by and you don't change at all. But boy, when you're a kid, 3 years is like a world of difference. So between when I was kind of 14 and when I was 18, but by the time this Goofy movie came out, I was just not interested at all. I do remember reading a couple of reviews about it, and this was mainly just because I read reviews of everything. Newspaper would come to the house. People still had newspapers in those days. And I would always open it to the entertainment section and just kind of read about the new movies that were coming out. And I remember this movie, critics did not like it. They said it was kind of boring and nothing really interesting was going on. So, like, that definitely, if I had been on the fence at all, that would have kind of persuaded me that there was nothing to this movie. So that was 1995. It's 2018, so kind of 23 years in the past, I guess. Recently, I guess meaning a few months ago, the Nostalgia Critic did a video on a Goofy movie. I watched the Nostalgia Critic. He's good for the most part. He made an interesting comment in this Goofy movie that kind of the generation after me, the ones that have kind of grown up in the years since then, really love this movie. In fact, it's become like a huge cult classic, something that has inspired a lot of fan art. People kind of dress up at these characters at Comic-Con. There's just like a huge love for this movie, kind of based on the generation that grew up with it. And he did a video kind of trying to puzzle out why people love this movie so much. And I kind of thought, I saw the video and I thought, interesting. Like I never knew this movie had kind of turned into such a big thing. I kind of left it at that. Like I wasn't, it was an interesting video essay, but the video essay satiated my curiosity. I kind of felt like I got the flavor of the movie from that video essay. And I didn't really have a desire to kind of watch it myself. But in my other life, my day job, I teach English here in Vietnam. And one of the things I've started doing over the past couple of years is I make a point of always showing movies in class. I know showing movies in class is like the stereotype of the lazy teacher. But I'm a firm believer in the value of movies for language learning, and I make up worksheets and materials to supplement it to help the kids kind of get the most out of it. But I mean, I really do believe that watching movies is one of the best ways to learn a language. Not to mention, it's one of the most interesting ways to learn a language. Like, nobody likes studying grammar. Everybody likes watching a movie. And if you have a children's class, which I do, teaching a class of kids that are about 8 to 10 years old, then if you can get them kind of interested by watching a movie, I think that's much better in the long term. Admittedly, it's a debate. Not everyone likes showing movies in the classroom, but I don't want to get into that because that's not what this video review is about. The point here being, we had just finished watching the last movie, and we were discussing the next movie. Now, it used to be, back when I first started doing this, I would just kind of choose a movie. I said, right, we're watching this movie. And they would say, okay. But the longer I've been teaching this class, I've had this class now for a few years, the more vocal they've been about their own choices, and the more of a negotiation choosing a movie has become. So instead of just picking a movie, I now give them choices. I say, okay, these are 6 choices, and we can vote on it. And the last time around I did this, I put a Goofy movie as one of the choices because, again, kind of under the influence of the Nostalgia Critic's video, and kind of being aware that this movie, even though I had never seen it, had been particularly influential or kind of very popular with a generation that grew up with it, I thought, yeah, maybe there's something to this movie. Like maybe my kids will get something out of it. And they voted for this movie, and we watched it over the course 2 or 3 months. We just do kind of like 5 or 7 minutes of the movie each time. Then I have a worksheet. We go over some of the vocabulary in the movie, and we just kind of break it up into small sections that way. And because I had never seen this movie before, I was kind of watching it with them. I mean, I would watch it like the day before to prepare the worksheet. But as we worked through the movie, I was kind of working through it with them. And now that we've come to the end of the movie, I feel like, again, because of this project I've started, I should give my review of it. By the way, in case you're wondering, the kids loved the movie, so it works great with its target audience. Me, I'm a little bit less impressed. I'll kind of get into my criticisms of it now. Apologies to anyone who grew up with this movie. I am sure that if you saw this movie at 5 years old, or maybe even 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, this was probably a really good movie for that age. I'm 39. I can't make that connection with this movie, so I'm gonna criticize some aspects of it. Sorry about that. Again, just to reiterate, the children I showed this movie to absolutely loved it. So it's hitting its mark with its target audience. And actually, just to be perfectly clear about this, it's not a bad movie. Kind of on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a solid 5. Like, it's perfectly serviceable. As far as like a goofy cartoon, it's a perfectly okay goofy cartoon. It kind of hits all the marks it needs to. I guess the big criticism I would have of it is there's nothing special about it as a movie. And remember, this was released to theaters originally. Back in 1995, this thing actually got a theatrical release. But if you go to see it, well, if you see it, there's no reason why this had to be in theaters, other than the obvious reason, which is to make money. But it's just, it's bland. The stakes aren't really that high. It's basically just an episode of the TV show with slightly better animation that they've kind of padded out into 78 minutes, but there's none of that really kind of movie magic here. Now, to be fair, this is true of a lot of movies based on TV shows, maybe especially cartoons. So you can list a long list of movies based on cartoon TV shows that have the exact same problem. And it's, again, to be fair, I think it's a hard thing to get around. It's easy for me to criticize it and say, well, it's just an episode of the TV show, there's nothing special about it. But like movies, the thing with movies is you kind of start out with new characters. The characters grow over the arc, and when you get to the end of it, kind of everything has changed, and the hero has got the princess, and the evil empire has been defeated, and kind of all that stuff. And you don't have that flexibility when you have a TV show. You start off with pre-existing characters. You can't really radically change everything. In a lot of cases, there's not that much to radically change in the first place. For example, like a Goofy movie, Goofy and his son are out in the suburbs. So like, what are the stakes here? the movie's kind of locked into this, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to criticize it, but I'm also going to kind of acknowledge that it's unfair that I'm criticizing this. Now, interestingly enough, for those of us who grew up with the TV show, they did change a lot of things around for the TV show. For the movie from the TV show. They changed some of the voice actors. I was looking at this on Wikipedia. I think Max, in particular, got the voice actor changed. They also kind of changed around a bit of a cast. So if you remember from the TV show, Pegleg Pete, or it wasn't Pegleg at that point, Pete, had a wife and a son and a daughter and a dog. And the dynamic between Pete and his wife was interesting because, you know, Pete's always a big bully, but then he was kind of firmly under the control of his wife. They got rid of the wife completely. They got rid of the daughter, I think her name was Pistol, completely. They got rid of the dog. So it's only kind of PJ, it's Pete and PJ, and it's Goofy and Max. So it's two fathers and two sons, and then where are the women? Who knows? You know, they died off screen or something. I don't know. They also added in a bunch of new characters for this. So Max has a love interest now, Roxanne, who I don't think was ever in the TV show. Roxanne has kind of a best friend, the class president, Stacy, who I don't think was in the TV show. And then, bizarrely enough, Pauly Shore is in this movie. Pauly Shore plays one of Max's friends, and again, this was a character who was never in the TV show, but then kind of in the movie, he shows up, and he's doing his Pauly Shore thing. You know, the whole, hey, Maximilian! I can't do it, but you know what I mean, right? You've seen Pauly Shore movies. Now, brief digression, I hated Pauly Shore when he was popular in the 90s. I just didn't get it. You know, I was a teenager at the time, so I guess I was in the target audience for it. But he was just everywhere. He wasn't funny. It was the same shtick every time. But he works well in this movie. He kind of, you know, punches it up just a little bit, kind of livens up the movie a little bit, comes off kind of as interesting and kind of charismatic with his character. And kind of after watching this, I came to the conclusion that actually there's nothing wrong with Pauly Shore. He works great as a minor character. I think the problem in the 90s is people gave him leading roles, and he's not a leading man. But as kind of a side character, his kind of surfer dude persona works perfectly in small doses. And they, to give credit where credit is due, they do this exactly right in the movie. He shows up briefly at the beginning. He's got a few kind of small lines and small appearances, and right at the point you're getting sick of him, then he's right out of the movie. Goes off Goofy and his son Max on a road trip. You never kind of see him again. He pops up briefly at the end. It's just like the perfect right amount of Pauly Shore. Any more of that would have kind of spoiled the movie. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, changes they made from the TV show. I was actually reading somewhere on Twitter, and I can't find the link now. You know, millions of things on Twitter every day. But somebody was doing like information about the DuckTales movie, and they were doing like 25 facts about it or something. One of the facts that they tweeted out, apparently, DuckTales the movie underperformed at the box office. It did not get in as much money as Disney had expected it to. So apparently this was one of the reasons why when they made a Goofy movie, they didn't want to take any chances, and they kind of retooled everything to make the movie much more accessible to movie audiences, and kind of jettisoned a whole bunch of stuff from the TV show and kind of changed some of the cast around and stuff like that. But the guy who does Goofy, a guy named Bill Farmer, is still the same. He'd been doing Goofy for years up to this point in kind of all Disney media. And I think I don't know what he's up to today. I think maybe he's still doing the voice of Goofy. And the guy who does Peg Leg Pete, I forget his name. Was it Jim Cummings? I don't remember. But he's the exact same guy. And boy, he has a distinctive voice. So I'll tell you what, like, not only was he the voice of Pete on Goof Troop, but he's been the voice of a number of Disney characters over the years. I think he was also the voice of Darkwing Duck and a lot of other characters. But when I was watching the movie and he was doing that Pete voice, that took me right back to my childhood. I was like, I remember that voice exactly. The other, and of course Goofy is very recognizable. The other voices I didn't click with me so much, but that Pete voice was just boom, right back to the 90s. Complete nostalgia. So I definitely remembered that from my days of watching the TV show. Yeah, so the plot of this movie. The movie focuses on Goofy's relationship with Max, his son. And Max is a teenager, so he's right around that age where he's starting to get embarrassed of his father, where he wants to kind of be independent and he wants to kind of spend more time with his high school friends and less time with his father. Goofy doesn't realize this, and so Goofy is having a hard time letting go, and they go on a road trip, and that's pretty much the movie. And then, throughout the movie they learn to appreciate each other. Goofy learns that he needs to give Max some freedom. Max learns that even though he's a teenager, he still has to kind of spend time with his dad. It's about as boring as it sounds. Or, actually, sorry, that's a little bit unfair. It's okay. There's a lot of kind of slapstick and stuff mixed in with this movie, which makes it very watchable. But the big problem, I think, is there's not enough plot here to get to a whole theatrical movie. Now, this movie was made by, it wasn't made by Disney Studios. It was made by Disney Toons, which is a subsidiary of Disney Studios, and they were responsible for kind of making all these Disney TV shows, and they also did a number of the direct-to-DVD Disney sequels kind of from the late 90s. And they're very good at making TV shows, but these guys have a difficult time transitioning into movies. Like they don't really understand the stakes of a movie. And so we've got this plot which really isn't good enough for a whole feature-length film. And so it's one of those movies where like the plot just keeps resetting as the character's relationship goes up and down. So Goofy and his dad start out on horrible terms, but then actually about kind of halfway through the movie, they do actually start to appreciate each other. They're kind of trapped in this car where Bigfoot is outside, and they have a heart-to-heart talk, and then they start to get along again, and then they're actually doing all right, and their relationship has been fixed. But then the movie still has like 30 minutes to go. So then actually we have to kind of reset this where something else will happen. Goofy finds out his son has changed the map, and then all of a sudden we're kind of right back to square one, and then we need to kind of go through the whole thing to get all over again. So that's, I guess, from a plot standpoint, that's my main criticism of the movie, is it doesn't kind of move in a linear line. It's one of those movies where like, okay, they're friends, now they're arguing, now they're friends, now they're arguing, and then finally we get kind of the big resolution at the end, and then they're apparently on good terms. So it's a little bit repetitive that way, and I guess a little bit boring. For the good stuff though, this movie, well, it's not anything spectacular. It has a few kind of laughs in there and does kind of everything a Goofy movie needs to do. Yeah, there's some slapstick scenes, some kind of you know, goofy jokes. There's a few laughs along the way which make this movie completely tolerable. And again, I think it does kind of work better with its target audience of kind of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds than it does with me at 39. But it's perfectly watchable. There are some songs in the movie, and the songs are okay. Yeah, they're not great, but you know, they're not terrible either. And that's what we're saying, because some of these kind of Disney Toon movies have just had terrible songs in them. This movie actually has a couple half-decent songs. You know, they're not classics, but they don't slow down the movie or something, and they're watchable enough. There's one of the favorite things I always remembered about the TV show was there'd be some kind of wacky kind of slapstick big ending scene, and this movie has a couple of those great scenes. There's one where their car is kind of careening down the mountains and off a waterfall. There's another one when they kind of are on the concert and they're running away from the security guards. And both of those scenes are just kind of good. Again, they're nothing. I guess one of the problems with this movie, and I know I'm repeating myself, but it depends what yardstick you want to use. If you say to yourself, this actually got a theatrical release, then you want to say, okay, these ending scenes are pretty underwhelming. But if you kind of compare it to the TV cartoon which it came out of, you're like, yeah, this is great. This is kind of exactly what that TV cartoon would have done. These scenes work perfectly. On the whole, I'm going to have to say that I was not overly impressed by this movie, but there's nothing bad about it either. It's a perfect 5 out of 5. You know, solidly average movie. Does everything really you'd expect a Goofy movie to do. Interesting then that it seems to have become such a cult classic with the younger generation, huh? It makes you think. Either there are two possibilities here. One possibility is that kids will watch anything, and then as you grow up, there's an interesting phenomenon of nostalgia where you remember kind of everything fondly from your past. I can understand that. Again, I'm too old for a Goofy movie, but you know, there's all sorts of cartoons from the 1980s which were absolutely horrible, but which I remember so fondly because I'm not remembering the actual cartoon itself. I'm remembering kind of the impressions or the feelings or the emotions it made on me, or kind of the world of these characters and the potential of it. You know, that He-Man cartoon, for example, is a great example of this. Absolutely terrible. But you know, when I see some of those old episodes on YouTube or something, I see those characters and I see kind of the vivid, bright colors, and I think, you know, there's an interesting world here, even if this is kind of a very stupid story, or most of the episodes of this cartoon are very poorly done. So, sorry, I'm rambling. That's option one, is that this movie was never all that great, but it's very fondly remembered by people who grew up with it just because of the nostalgia phenomenon. Which is interesting because that means that all the terrible movies nowadays, you know, like the Emoji Movie or this new Peter Rabbit movie, or kind of all the junk that kids are watching today, is going to be like a cult classic in 20 years. You know, sorry, this just occurred to me. The Black Cauldron is another perfect example from my generation. Reviewed terribly at the time, but most people my age have fond memories of it, just because of the nostalgia phenomenon. Option number two is that movie was really that great, and it was just kind of great with its target audience. Like there was a certain genius in marketing it to exactly people that age. I'm going to have to finish the review here because I'm coming up against a time limit. But thank you very much.